in this section, we're gonna be actually color grading. So what I thought was, like previously when I was making the DaVinci Resolve tutorial, I would first explain all the tools and then we would go through all the tools again to learn about them. So what I'm gonna be doing now is that I wouldn't explain any of the tools now. As we are color grading, then I would introduce different tools as we are color grading so you can see the real life examples. So say for example, what I do usually when I am color grading is, and if my image is in a normal picture format, if it's not desaturated like the Sony images what we saw before, then I would make node structure like so. So the first one, what I would do, I would label, you go node label, I would make it as white balance. Then if I go add node, you can do add serial, or you can just go Alt S. I usually go Alt S. Then here would be exposure. And then I would add another node here. I would do HDR. And then here I would do look. So look would be what kind of look we want. So this is the basic structure, but sometimes it also gets a bit complicated, so don't worry about that. And you can just, you know, drag around these nodes. So yeah, first one, we have to look for white balance. So how do we know that the white balance here is good or is accurate or not? If you see the graph here, so what I did to have these graphs is you go here and you go select parade. So if you see the graph here, then you can see that the red, green and blue, they are kind of on the same level. But if I show you some other image, for example this image, if you see this image, it looks a bit more red, a bit more yellow. If we go here, then here you can see that there is so much dense, the reds are so dense, the greens is a little bit, and there is barely, like the blues are just here at the bottom. So that kind of tells us that this image is red or warm dominant. So those are the information you can also get from the parade section. So let's go. So we were talking about white balance. So that's why in this image the white balance is off. But let's focus on this image first. I kind of still think that this image is a little bit bluish because I can see that there's this blue is a little bit higher. Ideally, the red, green and blue, they should be in the same level. So what are we going to do? We're going to be changing the white balance, or we're going to be changing the temperature of this image. And how do you do that? You go to primary color wheels, you know, this little circle, and then you go to the first circle, which is the primary color wheels. Sometimes the log wheels are the primary log wheels are selected. We need to go on primary color wheels. So how do we set up the white balance? So if I think that it's a bit too bluish, then what I would do is that to compensate that blue, I would introduce more warmth in the image. So if I kind of drag towards the right side, you can see that there is a little bit of warmth in the image. And you can also see here that the blues are going down. So this was before. So how do you see before? You just press Command or Control D, and that will show you before. This was after, this is before. So there is a little bit of introduction of warmth in the image, and you can see that my blues are now down. If you check on the graph, this was before, this is after. So now you can see that we have kind of brought all of them in the same level. So the white balance was not really kind of crazy in this image. We took care of it super easily. Now what I think that now we have to take care of the exposure. So the exposure, you can also just drag and drop here, move the nodes there. How do you take care of the exposure? So if you see here, we have in the primary color wheels, we have gain, gamma and lift. What does gain do is that if I go all the way up, gain kind of increases the brightness of the image. So now you can see that everything is out of this parade. I just go Control Z or Command Z. Our goal in DaVinci Resolve in color grading is to keep everything within this range. So to keep everything within this range. If something is below these black points, which means that it's too dark, and if something is above these 1023, which means that it's peaking. So we have to, for example, if we go in this image, I just went previous, you have this image as well with you, we can see that there's not much darks, there's not much shadows, and that you can see here in the parade. There's not much darks, but there's a lot of brightness somewhere in the middle, and that's where these clouds are. You can see just by looking at the parade, you can first thing you can see what is the color tone of the original image, and then you can see that how saturated or how contrasty the image is. Let me show you another example. So if we go to our Sony clips, here you can see that because the image is super less contrasty or super desaturated, everything is in the middle. And our goal is to expand the image, but expand until the thresholds. It shouldn't pass the threshold in most cases. So let's go to our main image here. So to change the exposure, what are we going to be doing is, I can see that we can still push the gain a little bit up. So I can go until here. So if you go before and after, Command D, Control D, it's a little bit bright. And then lift, we can bring a little bit down. So what does lift do is that lift kind of introduces the shadows or blacks in the image. So if I go like this, the image becomes super black. And if you want to reset it, just click here on the reset. What are we going to do? We just go a little bit down. So I can see that some things are below the threshold. That can be this bag, and that can be shadows here. But here's the thing. An image, it can go here dark, it can go up here, but the most important thing, which is the subject, which is us, that shouldn't be overlighted or super underexposed in normal cases. So here we took care of the lift. What does gamma does is that gamma so lift was taking care of the bottom portion, the gain was taking care of the top portion. What gamma does is that gamma kind of moves the whole brightness of the image up or down. So gamma would take care of the midsection. So if I go up, you can see that the whole image is lifting. If I go down, you can see that the whole image goes dark. So I would just reset it, maybe increase it a little bit. So gamma, if we increase it, you can see that the graph is going up, but it's not crossing here a lot. And now what we do, we can go full screen, we go P, and if you go Command or Control D, this was before, this is after, this is before, this is after. So what we have also done is that we have introduced some contrast in the image. And now what we're going to be doing is, we can still kind of push the exposure a little bit up because it's a travel video, so I want it to be a bit punchy. Now what we're going to be doing is, we go to, so we can see that we pushed the gain a bit too much, you know, so it's kind of crossing the thresholds, but we're going to be taking care of that in the HDR section. So what is an HDR section? So HDR is here, your HDR grade. So what happened in the primary color wheels was that it was kind of affecting the entire bright areas or the entire dark areas. But in HDR, you can choose kind of specific places where you want the changes. For example, I can see that a lot of things have blown out. So we would go to highlights. And if you don't have highlights here, you can just press the arrows and that would kind of bring the highlights. And you can go like this, so that would go through different scopes. So we're going to be going to highlights. And what highlights are is that highlights are the brightest part of the image. And we're going to be reducing that. So if I go here at exposure, you go down. So now you would see that all these things which kind of passed the threshold, which blew out the image, we can bring just them back. And if you see here, there's no change in anything. So you see now I can just bring all the brightness which was blowing out of the image back. So if we go full screen, we can go before, you can see everything, all these clouds were blowing out. We had no change here. This is after, before, after. So when we do after, then we see a lot of details in the clouds, which was lost because we pushed our gains a bit too hard. What you can also do here, I can see that the darks are a little bit dark, you know, we took care of the bright, so now we have to take care of the dark. It's just for the sake of this tutorial. I would leave my image like this because I like that dark, you know, the blacks being blacks. But just for the sake of this tutorial, I would lift this just to have the image in the safe section. So to lift this, you can go to the darks and then go up, 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 up. So now you can see the black bag is kind of becoming gray and it's kind of being good exposed. But you shouldn't push it too much, otherwise the image falls apart. So I can maybe leave it here and maybe increase the shadows as well a little bit. So now you see, just by doing that, you can bring a lot of brightness in the image. So you see, this was the image before, this is after. I personally don't like it. I really like the darks being darks, the shadows not super overlifted. So I would just reset it, but that was just an example that if something is, you know, below the dark point, you can always bring them back. So I would just reset it, and I love how the image looks. Okay, now what we're going to be doing is, I forgot one node, which is the saturation. So I would just go node label, saturation. So there are a lot of ways in DaVinci Resolve. So I would go to primary color wheels. So there are a lot of ways to introduce saturation in DaVinci Resolve. One of the most common way is this one. You just go to saturation, just bump up the saturation and hope for the best. But I think that it's just not the best. Like for some of you, yeah, you can say that it's really nice, but it almost looks like a cheap tool for saturation. So you see what happened was, so in the saturation node, I didn't change any saturation. In the look node, I changed the saturation because by mistake, the selection tool selected the look node. So we're gonna be resetting the node grid, and then we go to saturation node, and then we're gonna be changing that. Oh, by the way, if you wanna see before and after of where we are now, we go P, full screen, we go to option and D. So I cannot do it because I have this cursor with me. So I would just close it. So what I would be doing is I would just select all of these nodes and then go full screen, then before and after. So you see, before the image looked a little bit dull. Now we have brought a little bit of punch in the image and a bit of warmth as well. I can see that all these trees, they're a bit warm. So yeah, that was one way to saturate. Another way to saturate is with color boost. You can increase the boost. It is kind of similar to saturation, but a little bit more nicer, which is good. But if I go color boost, you can also see that that also changes the exposure of the image. If I see my parade here, you can see that my exposure is also going up and down. Like we worked so hard to bring all of these backs from the HDR panel, and just by color boost, everything is ruined again. You can see that blacks have passed these paths as well. So we are not going to be using color boost. I would just reset that. This should be 0. So I would reset it. But how do you change the saturation of the image? Let me show you a really cool way. So you click on the saturation node, then go right click, and then you go to color space. And in color space, you should select HSV, which is hue, saturation, and vibrance. We go HSV, and now right click, we go to channels. So we don't want to change the hues, so I would disable the first channel, and we don't want to change the, what was it? HSV, the vibrance. So we don't want to change the channels 3. What we want is the saturation, which is the S. So now whatever changes we would be doing in this node would only affect saturation. So with this being done, so what I did again, I would just go through again. I went to color space, selected HSV, and then I went to channels here, and then I disabled the channel 1 and channel 3. Now what we're going to be doing is, look at the image carefully. I've just zoomed in, so if you just scroll in and out, you can zoom in the image. So I would increase the gain, and what that would do is that would increase the saturation of the image. And if you see the parade, it's not really falling apart. We are increasing the saturation, but that is really slight saturation, and it goes really gradual. It's not going to just blow apart. So for some of you, you might think that there's no change in the saturation. If we go full screen, we can go before and after. So you can see how subtly we brought the saturation in, and the exposure of the image has not changed at all. How cool is that? So that is with gain. We can also do a little bit of saturation with gamma, and that would change the, so the gains is kind of giving the saturation to most of the bright areas, and then gamma is to the mid area. So if I increase a little bit, so we just gonna keep it until here. And then if we go full screen, and then we go before and after, you can see we have brought the saturation, but it's a really subtle. You can see the color of the bag, you can see color of the buildings. You just go before and after, you can see the grass. Like, this image already looks really nice. So that is saturation. And I recently discovered this way of saturation and I've never looked back since. So now if we just go before and after, because it's just so satisfying to watch, we're gonna be pressing Option D or Alt D. Before image, just a normal image. Yeah, pretty well exposed, but yeah, just an okay image. And this is what we did until now. So I'm already really liking it. You can leave it until here, because for a travel video, I think this is really, really perfect. So what we did until now was something called as color correction, where we brought the image to our desired liking. But in the upcoming sections, we're going to be doing color grading, where we would be sort of making some other changes in the image to have a certain look. But for a travel video, I think this is pretty good because it is looking like a normal image. It looks quite good. And I am really happy with the result, because in some of the travel videos, you don't want to have a crazy color grading. You don't want to have a, really heavy or cinematic color grading. You just want to look, you just want it to look bright and nice and happy. And I think we have achieved that. So yeah, we are done with color correction. Upcoming section, I'm going to be showing you color grading. But let me show you something really cool before we go further. So if I want to copy this whole setting, or if I want to have like a preset of this, whatever we did until now, and if we want to put it to other clips, what I can do, you just need to kind of enable the gallery and go to stills. What we can do, you go right click and you go grab still. So now what we did with that step was we copied the settings and we have made a kind of a preset, you can say. And now if you go to clip, so that's why clip is handy. And if we kind of paste, if you want to paste the same setting on this image, then what we can do, you go right click, and if you just hover around this, this preset, it already shows you how the image looks. So you can go right click and you can go apply grade, and that would have the same node structure. So why it is really handy? It is really handy because now I think that this image is a little bit too warm, and because we copied the same structure and because we labeled each node, I know that it is too warm because we made the other image warm. But that warmth is not applicable to all the image. So what we can do, we can disable this node here and see how it looks. So to disable this node, we need to go Command D or Control D. And now I think it's looking really fine. So this was warm look, this is before. So whatever you prefer, you can choose it. And there's another tip. For example, if you think that the saturation was a bit too much, I want it to be, so this was before saturation, this is after. So yeah, if you thought that the saturation was a bit too much, I want kind of 50% effect of the saturation, what we did in the last image. So then you don't need to go here and calculate what is the 50% of the gain, what we increased, and what is the 50% of gamma, what we increased. What you can do, you can just reduce the opacity of this node to 50%. And to do that, let's go here. Click on this node and then you go here. You go to key. You click the key and then key output, you can reduce it. So if I reduce it, then I can also see the saturation going down a little bit. And if I just go here, then that's 50% of the initial saturation. And if I go like this, that's 100%. That's one was 100, you can also go 150 to 100%. So this was before and after, and if you're just gonna go 0.5, you can go 50% saturation, because I can imagine that that saturation what we chose for the previous image, that might not be applicable. I am sure in this scene that saturation might not be applicable. So let's go to gallery, then we kind of paste this. It looks pretty good, but we can also increase the saturation a bit more. So we can, if you increase the saturation a little bit more, because it is an overcast day, the image is already a bit dull. So to have a bit more color, this is before, this is after. So yeah, that's how you can also change the opacity, what we say in technical terms, of a node by just going to key and changing the key output. So I would just reset the grades from this video and I would be back here. So yeah, in this section what we learned is color correction, where we changed the white balance first, then we took care of the exposure, then we went to the HDR panel to take care of the highlights, and you can also target specific exposure places by HDR panel, and then we did the saturation. So yeah, this was, I'll just do it one more time. This was before, this is after. Already looks perfect. But in the next section, I'm going to be showing you some color grading tips. So let's go.